What's up, everyone, and welcome to ClearTalk. So in this video, I wanted to give kind of a this is a part two to the previous a video about the ICE shooting that happened yesterday. This is kind of a follow up. All right, that I real quick, because I felt like I went to that video with not quite enough information, not particularly just about that one, but about like others, even just like me forgetting Renee Good's name. Oh my gosh, I couldn't. I get that. That really bothered me. But anyway, so what we're going to talk about in this video, I'm going to list out the names, the identified names that I could find, because I stated in there that I had seen a report about 11 people fatal shootings so far. And that all depends upon reports and how you report them and how you're looking at reports. It could be anywhere from 8 to 11, depending upon whether you're talking about just ICE or also CPP or the DHS or on duty, off duty, and different kinds of like scenarios and inquiries that you could like try to list them out as the only amount. I can only find 7 names that have actually been identified and released officially. The rest are either not the like details and stuff of information have not been released, or I just could not find them. But real quick, I just wanted to go through. Okay, we have, of course, March the 15th of 2025. This was Ruben Ray Martinez. This was in South Padre Island, Texas. This was a U.S. citizen. It was stopped after shot after a traffic stop. This has been disputed since day one, and no indictment of the agent has happened. He was 23. That was ICE. I don't exactly remember the details around that one. But that was the first. That was the first one. You have September 12th. 2025, Silvera Villegas Gonzalez. I might jack up some of these names, and I apologize for that. He was 31. This was ICE. This was in Illinois. Killed during an attempted arrest. The video footage that was released later brought into question ICE's initial accounts and stuff of what happened. I vaguely remember this one. Although I don't exactly remember all the details around that one either, but I do kind of vaguely remember that one. And that's going to be kind of the issue, like with all of them, is that the ICE accounts do not have. They were not accurate. This is, remember, back under NOAM, and whenever any kind of shooting would happen, they would immediately come out. Brand them as terrorists, brand them as, illegal, brand them all kinds of different ways. They would make all these like off the cuff arguments or like excuses for why it happened before any type of investigation had even happened. That's one of the reasons why no one was quickly removed, especially after the incidents in Minnesota, which we're about to get to. You had December the 31st, 2025. That was Keith Porter Jr. This was in Las Vegas. He was 42. This was the one that was shot by the off-duty ICE agent on New Year's Eve. That one was a pretty big one there. And then we had Renee Nicole Good, the one that I forgot. I still apologize for that one. That was in January 7th. That was in Minneapolis by ICE. She was a U.S. citizen, shot during the immigration operation when she was claims of interfering with the agents, arresting somebody. We broke this one down majorly because that was the very first one that really made like major international news and condemnation of ICE. Because it was just so blatantly wrong and so blatantly, of course, a lot of video footage and different angles, and I mean, it was crazy. Should not have happened. And again, she was a U.S. citizen. Then we had, just a few weeks after that, we had Alex Jeffrey Preddy, which was heavily disputed, and condemnation to ICE. Again, a U.S. citizen. You remember he did have a gun, a loaded gun on his person, on his hip. The ICE agents claimed that they mistaken his phone that he was on as a gun. Absolutely ridiculous. Um, he was an ICU nurse, veteran nurse. Had worked with veteran hospitals and stuff. I mean, this was a just nothing bad about this guy whatsoever. Again, a U.S. citizen. He was just there with um, protesters and stuff in Minneapolis, and he wind up being shot and killed. Agents tackled him, removed his phone from him, disarmed him of his weapon. Somehow, some gunshot went off. Whether it was, I think it's still questionable whether or not it was an agent accidentally disarming their firearm, or the firearm being removed from Alex Pretty, that firearm being discharged accidentally by the officers, but then that turned around and caused the officers around to back off and start shooting at Pretty, assuming that he was the one doing it. Anyway, it was absolutely crazy. Should not have happened again. Huge condemnation around that one. And then, after all of the incidents in Minnesota, you had this sort of course, that's when things started happening around with Israel and with Iran, and we've had ever since then, just the constant back and forth. You had ICE kind of calm down, or at least reports around ICE calming down. But then now that we are, past the July 4th and the celebration of the 250, we've talked about how they've ramped up ICE again, and then already, just within a couple of weeks, we have 2 deaths. Last week, we talked briefly about Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. I could be jacking that up. That was the guy that was, I think he's around in his 50s or something. That was done by ICE in Houston, Texas. Shot again, operation that was not even targeting him. ICE claimed that he drove towards an agent. There were several witnesses, though, that disputed that. This was the guy that has like 3 U.S. citizen children that are very successful. He's been here for like 30 years. Absolutely no reason why this guy should have been caught up, should not have been shot. He was not a threat, and should, it's just ridiculous. And then, of course, yesterday, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, again, I could be jacking names up here, but I apologize, 26. This was again an ICE in Maine, Colombian national, and from what we know now, this was not even again operation for targeting him. He just happened to be at the residence. He was attempting to leave the residence, and ICE agents engaged with him. Reports of them trying to hit his car, and then one of the agents somehow shot him in the head. This individual was legally here. Even though the ICE claim was that he was an illegal immigrant, illegal alien, actually is what they called him. But he was actually here on a work visa, perfectly legal to be here, and no, from what I can tell, no criminal record or anything. So there was absolutely, again, a completely innocent person, as all of these people were completely innocent people that died at the hands of ICE. Now, again, this is just the names that I could come across and find. The other 2 to 3 that potentially were fatally shot, I do not have information about. But again, this completely when you're talking about and arguing that ICE should be here and that they're going after all the illegal, the bad criminals and the worst of the worst, and which you constantly hear from Trump, you constantly hear from the administration, you constantly hear from Stephen Miller, and you constantly hear from all the others. You constantly heard from Noam when she was in there. I mean, if that was the case, then everybody on this list would be criminals. You would be accidentally killing criminals. All right? But these are not criminals. All right? Why is it that the ones that are coming up dead are not criminals? They're half of which are actual U.S. citizens. And those that you weren't even targeting, but yet somehow they want. This is the lack of training. This is the lack of understanding and purpose by these individuals that have been placed in these positions of quote unquote authority, quote unquote federal authority to make arrests, and they are being careless and think that they have impunity, think that they cannot be hurt because you have yet to bring justice to any of them that have committed any of these previous incidents beforehand. I mean, the guy that, even with Renee Good, the guy that shot and killed her, I still have not seen him. I think that at one point I heard a report that he may have been back out or back on the force or something, but I've still yet to see him. He was in hiding for a while. The guy that supposedly shot the Guerrero yesterday, he has been supposedly put on leave at the moment or whatever, pending the investigation. So I mean, when you do not actually bring justice, when you do not actually bring investigations, legitimate investigations, to even make your case that you are doing legal operations, okay? You just make the claims and then keep pedaling forward without any justice, without any judiciary like procedure to validate your operations, and validate what happened was self-defense. You're just pushing forward, not caring whatsoever. And these officers, quote unquote officers, that are, pretty much just racist Gestapo thugs, think that they can do whatever they want to. Think that they can be as violent as they want to, be aggressive as they want to, shoot people apparently if they want to. Because of lack of training, lack of control, lack of respect for law and for their position, or the operations that they are supposed to be carrying out, which should be carried out in a respectful and honorable and lawful way. When you have no actual consequences for these types of actions, for these things happening, this is what you get. You continue to get these results: innocent people dying and being shot. I mean, again, there have been upwards of 52 to 54 people that have died within custody in the detention centers and stuff, the concentration camps that ICE have placed people in, because due to just lack of responsibility and care for these individuals in these camps. And I understand, MAGA. You don't care. You don't care. This is exactly what you asked for. This is exactly what you want. You want hatred and bigotry and harsh treatments for people that you quote unquote deem as illegal and shouldn't be here and criminal and blah 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 blah. Because you have no moral standing at this point. You have shown it over and over and over and over and over again. You do not care about justice. You do not care about the law. All you want is to see brown people and people of color injured and treated disrespectfully and treated with carelessness. You don't care if they die. You just target that as well. They shouldn't have been here. And if they're a U.S. citizen that you quote and deem as interfering with those actions, then well, they shouldn't have been there too. Good riddance. They died. Oh well. And that is absolutely despicable opinion, despicable ideology, despicable behavior on your part, and continues to show that you are the absolute worst of the worst in this country. You are the ones that should be investigated, and it's anyways. I wanted to give a quick video to give more substance and kind of bring more justice to those names that have been shot fatally because of ICE operations, and understanding that these individuals should not have been. They should still be here. And it's ICE's carelessness. Even if you want to argue that you are completely behind these operations, you must admit that ICE is careless and they are acting in an unlawful manner. All right, stop defending this as oh well, it just happens shit. No, it should not be happening. Okay. If they were carrying out their operations lawfully and doing so, then they would be able to apprehend, they would be able to arrest, or they would be able to detain, they would be able to de-escalate these scenarios and what has happened and all of these individual circumstances. They would have been able to do that without lethal force. And personally, quite frankly, until they're able to do so, until they're able to carry out these types of operations without these incidences of fatal results, they should not be operating. Period. They just shouldn't. They should be completely paused and cut off until they have been properly trained and they have shown that they can operate in a lawful manner, respectful manner, and actually go after people that should not be here. Okay, and I know that's a fine line for difference between, or well, it's actually a major gap difference between me, what I think is legally here, and what you MAGA think is legally here. But nevertheless, until they can show and prove that they can do this in a respectful, lawful manner, there should be no more ICE actions, period. Now, again, I would go further and completely abolish them. I mean, understand, this is a agency that has not been here very long, okay? All right? We're talking about, like, 2003 that they were established? They did not exist before that, so don't pretend like this is some sort of long-running agency that's has so much respect and has done so much good for the United States. No, they haven't. Matter of fact, ICE has been hated damn near since day one. They have constantly, even before this administration, there was constant questions around some of their operations and people not exactly feeling like it was kind of, a legit organization, because it was created in the name of fighting terrorism, where there was so much question around even all of those operations after 9/11. So there's been a problem around ICE all along, and the Trump administration has just exacerbated that with allowing them to just go off the wall road crazy and funded to more than ever, any agency ever outside of the Pentagon. And the fact that in these last two incidences, the past 2 weeks, There is no body cam footage. What happened to that? That was supposed to be a part of the funding that they pushed through. Um, it was supposed to be for body cam footage to be added to show, uh, uh, um, evidence of when any kind of incident like this come out, that like to show their proof of evidence. And yet both incidences, there was no camera footage. They were not wearing body cams. So what happened? What happened, ICE? Again, it's the lack of competence in running these organizations, these agencies, and running these teams, and having accountability for what they're doing. Again, I think they should be abolished, but at the very least, they need to be reined in and paused and trained properly, and then, again, out of, a proof, it should be, at the very least, their operations resume only once they've proven that they can actually perform under the actual lawful accordances that they're supposed to be doing, and without fatal outcomes, without abusive and violent outcomes. And actually go after what you claim you're going after, which I have yet to see. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. Until next time, peace, ClearTalk, I'm out.